You having a problem?
Well, you know, it's making this weird noise. I don't know why. I was trying to have the packet up on, I was trying to be clever here, and
I thought we were all supposed to start dancing to it or something.
Have the packet up, but okay, all right.
All right.
So I couldn't find a mallet and a and anything, but
Fair enough.
so I'm calling this meeting to order. I thought you'd get a kick out of that, Anne Marie. Happy Cinco de Mayo.
Is oh my, yeah, it is. Wow.
Yeah, so it's Cinco de Mayo on Taco Tuesday, and we're not holding a regular meeting because of the virus named after a Mexican beer. It all fits.
Yep.
All fits.
The last normal day was Friday the 13th. Let's not forget.
There you go. So
Where are the tacos?
it is Tuesday, May 5th, and 6 p.m. And this is the Lincoln City Planning Commission meeting. I don't have a flag. I don't know. Have you been doing the Pledge of Allegiance?
No, we'll dispense with the pledge.
Okay, none of that. How about a roll call?
We should have a roll call.
Okay.
James?
Marcy Baker?
Here.
Kim Blackerby?
Here.
Josh Brainerd?
Here.
Patty Crowan?
Here.
Lenny Nelson?
Here.
Miles Schlesinger?
Here.
Matt Smith?
Here.
All right. Everybody's here. Nice to see you all. All right. We have the minutes from our last meeting, which was way back on March 3rd. So I assume everybody had an opportunity to review those minutes. Does anybody have any comments, suggestions, revisions?
I thought they were very well done.
Okay, I did too. It was a difficult meeting to transcribe, so nice job, James. Do I have a motion to accept?
A motion to accept the minutes from what was the date?
March
February
3rd.
from the March 3rd Lincoln City Planning Commission meeting minutes.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Have you been doing an all in favor, or do you have to do a voice vote for everything?
We've done, City Council's been doing all in favor,
Okay.
unless it's something key in which they would do a voice vote, but for this, an all in favor will work.
Okay, all in favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are accepted. We don't have any final orders, resolution, or written communications. We do have a number of public hearings and deliberations on the agenda tonight. So I know the packet was long, thanks, but luckily a lot of it were just pages with strike through. So it wasn't quite as daunting as it appeared when first opening it and seeing 370 pages. First up, we have the deliberations on file Annex 2020-01 and CPA and ZC 2020-02. So this is the one that we had a public hearing on. We closed the record and deliberated, and then came back for the final vote, and after some discussion decided to deliberate a little bit more at our next meeting, which I don't think any of us expected to be 2 months later. So we are back now at the deliberation stage for this. I'm assuming we can ask legal questions, but no new information, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I'll ask that first. If anybody has any questions or concerns to pose to the city attorney or staff? Not seeing, this is so weird, not seeing anything. Okay, so the matters returned to
I
the.
do have a question.
Yes, Kim.
So I don't know if it's Richard or Anne Marie. I'm just kind of curious in terms of cost to the city, in terms of if the annexation of the property occurs, what sort of, or is approved, what sort of costs does the city incur if the land just sits there?
We can't add new facts at this point.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So basically you can just ask any legal issues that were raised during the presentation or the information that was provided during the actual proceeding. So I really don't have anything else, surprise, surprise, to say. I think my comments were well covered in the minutes from the March 3rd meeting. So I'm interested to hear what the rest of you are feeling on this. So who wants to start?
You might want to start with a motion, one way or the other, and then go from there.
Oh, okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
can we do this in two motions again? The annex and
You need a
the,
motion for the annexation and then a separate motion for the zoning?
yes,
We should.
You did it last time, I believe, so sure.
We did. Okay. So do you have a motion to make, Lenny?
I move that we allow the annexation. And you can read all the numbers out and stuff, because like you, I can't get my agenda up.
Okay. So there's a motion on the floor to recommend the annexation to the city council.
Thank
I
you.
second. Kim?
Kim, you seconded it?
Yep.
Okay. I think we should probably do a vote individually on this.
Yes.
Okay, so James, do you want to do the honors?
Just for the record, this is Annex 2020-01. Am I right?
Correct.
Correct.
Yes. Okay, Lenny Nelson,
Yes,
Patty Crowan,
No.
Max Smith,
No.
Marcy Baker,
No.
Miles Schlesinger,
Yes.
Kim Blackerby,
Yes.
and Josh Branger.
Yes.
Okay, the votes are 4-1 or 4-3, yes.
So I believe your planning commission rules require the no votes to explain why. And I believe that Patty mentioned that the minutes seem to reflect that. Is that the consensus on the reasons why?
It is for me.
works for me.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So that's one. The second motion we need is for the zoning change, which is to rezone the 11.15 acres to rezone it as R15. Do I have a motion?
I move that we recommend to the city council that we deny that.
I
Okay.
second that.
Do I, Marcy, did you second?
Yeah, I second that.
Okay, James? So now a yes vote is denying the zoning change.
Correct.
Okay, James?
Lenny Nelson,
Yes,
Patty Crowan,
Yes.
Max Smith,
Yes.
Marcy Baker,
Yes.
Miles Schlesinger,
Yes.
Tim Blackerby,
Yes.
Josh Brainerd.
Yes.
So for clarity, that was ZC 2020-02. That's the annexation property. You're voting to not zone it. Is that correct?
Not to rezone it.
Not to rezone it. So it stays with the county zoning.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm assuming, Lenny, that is because you felt, or at least, all right, let me speak for myself. I didn't think the R15 was the appropriate zoning for it. And since we couldn't change that and vote on a different zone for it, it was an up or down vote on whether or not it became R15 or R15RE. We didn't have that option. So it was yes or no, right?
Well, you're kind of putting words in my mouth, but that works. It's close enough. I mean, I didn't think that, I thought it should be annexed because it's surrounded, but I don't think we necessarily want a density type of annexation in that area when it's surrounded by other things.
Okay, can that explanation be included in the recommendation to the council?
Works for me.
Yes.
Okay.
And I have a question, comment. I don't know if I'm supposed to raise my hand. I'll just talk.
I see your hand applauding.
And so I don't know if I can ask this or not, but Anne Marie, I believe I read in the minutes and remember from watching the video that there really isn't that much difference in terms of what it was proposed and what the county zoning is and what the proposed change was.
I have not done an in-depth comparison between the county zone and what was proposed, but off the top of my head, I believe the only difference is the county zone, the square footage minimum is 6,000 square feet, and they were requesting our R15, which is 5,000 square feet.
And
The R15 would be roughly 20% more.
20% more density.
Right, 20% more lots.
Yeah.
so staying with the county zoning is less dense.
Correct.
And I seem to remember that there might be a setback and a height difference as well.
And I don't recall, Kim.
Or was that may have been comparing to the RE zoning? I don't know.
But it was in the R1RE. The
Okay.
R1RE has a 30 and R15 has a 35.
Gotcha. Okay, thank
And
you.
the setbacks are slightly different as well.
Okay? We good on that? Okay, the next item on the agenda is the deliberation of CPA and ZC 2020-01. This was to amend the comprehensive plan map and the zoning map to change the properties addressed as, and these are all on Southwest Ebb Avenue, 305, 315, 327, 339, 343, 405, one that's unaddressed, 427, and then one on 887 Southwest 5th Street. And this is a request to change it from a comprehensive plan designation of high density residential RM to recreation commercial district RC, and from the zoning of multifamily residential RM zone to recreation commercial RC zone. So on this one, we, I believe, left the record open. We didn't?
No, the record's been closed and the public hearing's been closed.
Sorry, I'm looking at the February 18th thing. Okay.
I asked on the last one, I neglected to ask if Commissioner Nelson had reviewed the file. I'm sure she did, but I should get that on the record.
Commissioner Nelson reviewed it in all its length.
All right, thank you. And I believe this one that you're currently dealing with was the one that, did you not do a motion to reconsider deliberations and end up with a tie vote? Is that the one, am I remembering correctly?
No, I think that's the other
No,
one.
That was the one you just did?
Yep, that was the annexation, Richard.
Okay.
I think that in this case, the applicant asked to have the record left open for additional materials, and we just never got to the point where we closed it. The record.
No, the record was closed.
We deliberated on this, and I believe this one we also came to a tie vote.
You did.
And it was 3-3 because either you weren't there or Miles wasn't there. And
Miles was not there.
Miles
Yeah,
wasn't
that's
We
right.
continued it until Miles was able to be back.
right. Right.
And I missed the only one meeting.
Okay. So you missed this one.
Yeah.
So
And
why-
Miles has reviewed the record of anything that you reviewed the record for this?
I read the report on this.
Did you happen to watch the video?
No.
Granted, last time the video was just deliberations, not the hearing. So have you viewed all the hearing materials?
He was at all the hearings.
I think I reviewed the material that I read on it, but quite frankly,
Okay. So you did not miss the hearing. You only missed the deliberations last time.
That is correct, Richard.
Okay, so you have all the evidence. Okay, I think that's what we need. Thank you.
Okay. So thoughts? Anyone?
I have some thoughts on this one. When I was reviewing the minutes and rewatching the video, Josh's comments that he made about that it wouldn't be terrible for there to be development there. I could be convinced in that direction possibly, but continuing, Mac and Kim both acknowledged that, and the applicant acknowledged that the real intent is to be able to pass along the value, and I really feel that we just have to look at what's in front of us, which is rezoning to commercial, and can't consider the VRD aspect of it. And I think that there are other avenues or channels, or with all these rezoning applications we're getting, I think the city should maybe address their VRD rules that don't seem to be working for people, but that's not our job to consider that with the rezoning application. It's kind of my thoughts on it.
Okay. Others?
Okay, there. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mac.
Okay, I'll just add to it.
I was just going to
This should be wait and be considered when we actually take up rezoning of everything in the city and that. But again, without necessarily studying this property, I bank nearby without using the name. It's pretty obvious, and I just think that area, if we were to be in a process of rezoning the city now, that area just stands out to be more of a commercial looking zone. And whether it has to do with VRDs or not, I think it would fit into that type of zoning and would lean that direction.
Okay. Mac?
Along with what was being brought up during the last time we met about this is this the time to be doing this? One of the concerns is, are we looking at we brought up, like we've been talking about, just the piecemeal proposals of zone changes, Should we then address this zone change at the time when we're at a different time, when we're looking at doing a more comprehensive change?
Okay.
When would we do that? When would be a comprehensive change occur? Is that 60 days off, or is it 2 years off?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking. Is that like, is this the time to be doing that, to be examining the zone changes?
Well, I think that's one of the issues, and that's what's come back. I almost think everyone's in agreement the comprehensive plan needs updated. Just the short time I've been on the planning commission, we run into this a lot, and I know Chair Crone's comments earlier echo that, and I agree completely with that. But I think it's a larger issue at hand. I don't ever keep my original position on the decision that it does stand out as more of a recreational commercial zone. I think that if the comprehensive plan were amended, it would definitely fall more solidly in that category. I definitely also recognize the fact what you all are saying and what Chair Crone mentioned during this first meeting, that the comprehensive plan does need revised, but that's a very, very staff and time and resource intensive process. And I know the city has been trying to work on it, also dealing with staff changes and things like that. And those are big setbacks to try and get big projects and programs done like that back. So, Kim, I don't know if the city has a timeline on that right now. I know we've spoken about it, and I know it's been on and off the agendas, but it's there. They're trying. They're aware of it. It's just a very, very big undertaking.
Miles?
I really think that the city will have such problems for the next 2 years that the comprehensive plan is going to take a back seat to just getting the economy rolling again. And I'm torn between what Josh Brainerd has said, because I really believe that it is a problem that will be satisfied when the comprehensive plan is redone. But I don't see any way that we're going to get a chance to look at it in the next two years, basically.
Lenny and then Mac.
Yeah, I tend to agree. If you look at the amount of time we've spent doing the other amendments on the sign ordinance and stuff like that, not to mention how much, like he says, staff time will be required. I would think 2 years will probably be, well, quicker than I would expect it to occur. So if we're expecting them to get relief, I think it'll be a long time out.
Mac?
Just following along the lines of this, what is the urgency of this need? Is this something that can wait for when we have the opportunity to revisit that?
You have a quasi-judicial application before you. You have to act on it. So yeah, that's what the urgency is. You need to rule one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean the urgency of the zone change. Do we need to change this to a commercial now?
That's the question of whether or not you feel there is a need for more commercial. And as was stated, there is no limitation to the existing VRD use. You zone it to general commercial, it's general commercial. You zone it to RC, it's RC. It's, when you change the zone, there's no limitation on it unless there's a binding development agreement.
Okay.
There's none.
I guess I'm just wondering, is there a plan that needs this change now, or can we revisit something like this later down the road? But I guess
as Richard said, we have it in front of us. We need to. Yeah. I mean, they are initiating this request. So we need to act on the request. We can't tell them to come back later with the request, one way or the other. So, Kim, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think I kind of look at what's going on in the city and the fact that whether this is a VRD thing or not, and it may be, most likely will be, but 3 of the 6 developed properties are already VRDs. I guess a little bit from an emotional standpoint, one, it looks like a commercial zone, and if there's something we can do for some of the people in this city that would look forward that we're doing something to help some people out, why not? Maybe it's my soft heart coming out.
Okay, I'm going to chime in here. We have had several requests for zone changes in the last, I guess, year or so. I know there's some sensitivity to using the term spot zoning, but I'm going to use it because it's what happens when you're talking about 1, 2, or a handful of lots to be changed. I think for consistency's sake, we have consistently responded to these requests by saying, yes, we recognize there are some issues with the zoning as it stands in the city, but this is inconsistent with the plan that is in place right now. And if I want to be consistent in my rulings, my tendency for this one is to say no. I didn't hear from the applicant any urgency that there was a plan in place, what they wanted to do that needed this zone change, other than the VRD issue, which I guess is neither here nor there. In my opinion, it's inconsistent, and because of that, I would rather err on the side of consistency and look at zoning holistically for the city when we get an opportunity to do that. So that's my thought. Did anybody not? Oh, Richard?
Yeah, I'm sorry. For this application, and when I go back to the other one, deliberations, I was looking at the minutes here, and I had warned you all not to engage in any ex parte communications between the last discussion on this and these deliberations. But we did not start this discussion with, does anybody have any ex parte communications to disclose? Now, I'm hoping y'all listened when I asked you, please don't have any, but I think for the record, for this application and for the prior one, you should ask that question and get the responses.
Okay, good idea. So let's start with this one. Since our last meeting and deliberation on this, has anyone had any ex parte communications regarding this particular application?
Well, I tried to tell my cat about it, but she was bored.
Okay. Anybody that might communicate it to the press? I don't know how connected your cat is, but
not very.
Okay. All right. And just to clarify, for the previous application, did anybody have any ex parte communications on the annexation or rezoning? Okay, I'm seeing lots of no's. So, all right. Okay, thank you, Richard, for keeping us honest. That's why we have you here. Okay, anybody have any other thoughts on this one?
Yeah, Betty, just to your comments, I hear what you're saying. I agree with you, except for the fact that, again, if we're not going to get to a comprehensive rezoning plan, then we could interpret what you're saying as we wouldn't ever look at any other rezonings until the city does a comprehensive plan, which I think in that case, since it's not going to happen in the foreseeable future, we need to make some spot zoning decisions if they make sense for the good of the city and the citizenry.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Kim, but what I don't want to see is an application now every meeting for a change in zoning, you know, that we would get a spot, you know, I mean, it was the concern, a couple of zoning requests before this one. I don't have any way to know whether that decision spurred on others, but I'm concerned that we will end up with a that we will slide down that proverbial slippery slope, and anyone in the city who wants to change their zoning will come in and make those requests. And if we're not consistent, then we don't have much to stand on in terms of making decisions on these things. And then it becomes fairly subjective, which is my concern.
Yeah, I agree that consistency is
Chair
important.
Kerwin,
Yes,
if I may,
yes.
let me remind the commissioners that we do have a currently adopted comprehensive plan, and it does have policies and goals and objectives in it. While they may be outdated, it is still our currently adopted comprehensive plan. And rezoning decisions are based on the adopted comprehensive plan that we have in place right now. There is no way of knowing, even once a comprehensive plan update is commenced and completed, there's no way of knowing right now what the outcomes of that will be. Meaning that you can't project what you think this area may or may not be designated as in a future comprehensive plan update. That's not what's on the table. What's on the table is looking at this application based against the current comprehensive plan and the current comprehensive plan policies, goals, and objectives.
Right. Thank you for that clarification, Anne Marie. We don't know.
Madam Chair?
We don't know. Yes, Lenny.
Well, while I'm not altogether opposed to consistency, I don't know, the current comprehensive plan and system allows us to make this kind of decision. So it's not like once it's set there, that's set in stone and can never, ever, ever be changed under any circumstances. So we can make a decision to change it if we think the situation warrants it.
Okay. Any more thoughts? Okay. Does anyone care to make a motion?
I will. I move the Planning Commission approve CPA and ZC 2020-01.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, James?
Lenny Nelson,
Yes.
Patty Crow,
No.
Max Smith,
No.
Marcy Baker,
No.
Miles Schlesinger,
Yes.
Tim Blackerby,
Yes.
Josh Rainers.
Yes.
The result is 4 yes votes and 3 no votes.
Okay. We need our no votes explained, Mr. Apichello? Okay, you're muted, but I saw your head go up
Yeah,
and down.
Please.
All right, so mine is a question of consistency with the existing plan. It's inconsistent with the existing adopted comprehensive plan.
Is that essentially the same explanation for the past 2 denials of rezoning had to do with the inconsistency of changing the zone regarding the proximity of surrounding properties? Yeah,
Yeah.
as you recall, yeah, okay, that's where I thought you were going.
Yeah. Okay, so who else voted no needs to explain why. Marcy?
I voted no because I agree with staff that it is inconsistent with several planning goals, and that it is the northern border of a very large residential strip from Southwest 3rd all the way to Southwest 36th. And it was clear there was no plan for development, which seems to not leave much of a reason for the things we need to consider for criteria to rezone it. So I also think it will lead to applications from every VRD owner who isn't able to pass their property along or sell it as a VRD. And I think that would be exactly what Patty predicted of an application every meeting. So.
Okay. Thank you. Mac?
I don't have anything to add other than what has been brought up by Chair Crowan and Commissioner Baker. There is no apparent urgent need for a zone change at this time. The applicants didn't seem to have a need to continue the use that they stated that they wanted to continue. There was nothing keeping them from doing that with or without the zone change. So that's all I have to say in addition.
Okay. All right. Got that, James? Okay. All right. Moving on. It looks like CUP 2019-02 Oxenholt Northwest Port Avenue 6plex was withdrawn, correct?
Correct. You are correct.
Okay. So now we are up to Conditional Use Permit 2020-02 Devil's Lake Dredging. So let me get my script here. It is now 6:38. The public hearing for files CUP 2020-02 is now open. This public hearing concerns a request for a conditional use permit to dredge approximately 450 cubic yards of primarily beach sand from the lower portion of Devil's Lake near the Dee River and Northeast 1st Street. The applicant is the Devil's Lake Water Improvement District. The owner is the State of Oregon Division of State Lands. The commission must take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. First, does any member of the commission wish to declare an ex parte contact, a conflict of interest, or bias in this manner?
I declare a conflict. I will not be acting as a Lincoln State Planning Commissioner on this. I will be acting as a district manager for Devil's Lake Water Improvement District. So I'll excuse myself from any and all conversations on the Planning Commission side of this application.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Miles?
I have a bias, I think, because I know how hard the Devil's Lake Water Improvement District has worked since Josh Brainerd joined the staff as manager, and I think that my bias will go to the truth of the facts, and I can weigh my decisions fully within the guidelines that we operate under as planning commissioners.
Okay, Chair, first of all, Josh is easy. Josh would have an actual conflict of interest because, well, he works for the Devil's Lake Water Improvement District. So he has to recuse himself, and well, he has to announce his conflict. He has, and he has to recuse himself, not participate, not vote. Miles is not an employee of the district, so but he is indicating that he has a bias. But then he made a statement which sounded like he's willing to set that aside and make a decision based upon the facts and evidence in the record. Is that accurate, Miles?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so as the other planning commissioners, you get to decide whether or not Miles is going to participate. Do you believe him that he's going to set his bias aside and make a decision based upon the facts and evidence in the record? Or do you not believe him and you don't want him to participate or vote? So, and these are in your rules, and we've talked about this, I think, as recently as the training, but I know I sent them all to you. But so, commissioners, what say you about Miles participating?
You need a motion?
I think that would be appropriate.
I move that Miles be allowed to hear and vote on this issue.
I second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Oh, Miles, you disappointed me. I thought you would oppose it.
Now, you may want to ask if there's, obviously any member of the public could also bring out this bias challenge. I'm not sure. Is there anyone in the council chambers? What we set this up as is that if someone wanted to participate, they could actually, appear in the council chambers, and there's David, would let them, talk. Is there anybody there? Okay, well, I take it then no one wants to challenge Miles for bias, so I think you're past that.
And Richard?
Yeah.
I have not received any email comments either.
Okay, and as far as the applicant, I take it Josh will be presenting for the applicant?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Anne Marie, could you tilt your camera down just a little bit so yeah, there you are, because all we could see were your eyes. Much better, thank you. Okay, the following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing. Staff will now read a list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision. Anne Marie.
Okay, the applicable substantive criteria for this particular conditional use are contained in Lincoln City Municipal Code Chapter 17.60, Conditional Uses, and they are also contained in Chapter 17.44, Marine Waterways. There are 5 criteria from the Conditional Use Chapter, and then there are a list of criteria from the Marine Waterways Chapter. Evidence shall be provided that the applicant has complied with or fully intends to comply with all standards of the Department of Environmental Quality, the Division of State Lands, and all other agencies having interests or ordinances applicable to the property in question. Number 2, the activities shall not represent a source of water pollution to any nearby tidelands, marshlands, rivers, streams, or other waterways used for the raising, production, or preservation of marine life or other natural resources. Number 3, any filling or dredging activity shall not substantially alter the course of any channel or the natural movement of any waters, result in increased flood hazards, or cause the formation of appreciable bottom or sludge deposits deleterious to marine life. Number 4, any fill or dredging spoil area shall be deposited behind a watertight berm to avoid any sloughing and to stabilize the area. Number 5, if a fill is proposed of which any portion falls below mean higher high water or mean high water plus 6 feet, whichever is highest, and which is adjacent to or having potential access to a navigable waterway, the developer shall designate on the plan a portion of the parcel to remain unfilled for possible off-channel moorage or similar use. Number 6 is the list of items that must be included in the application. And then that takes us to Chapter 1760, which has the 5 criteria for any conditional use. And that is number 1, the proposal is in compliance with the comprehensive plan. Number 2, the site for the proposed use is adequate in size and shape. to accommodate the use and all yards, spaces, walls, and fences, parking, loading, landscaping, and other features required. Number 3, the site for the proposed use relates to streets and highways adequate in width and degree of improvement to handle the quantity and kind of vehicular traffic that would be generated by the proposed use. Number 4, the proposed use will have minimal adverse impact upon adjoining properties and the improvements thereon. And finally, number 5, in areas designated as requiring preservation of historic, scenic, or cultural attributes, proposed structures will be of a design complementary to the surrounding area.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable substantive criteria previously listed, or such other criteria in the plan or land use regulations which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the decision maker to respond to the issue precludes any action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the end of this hearing, any person who participated may request a continuance to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence, or request that the record be left open to submit additional written testimony, argument, or evidence. Before the staff presents a report, I would like to summarize the public hearing procedures which have been adopted by the Planning Commission and City Council. Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: preliminary matters and required statements, the staff report, questions of staff, the applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, those neutral, those opposed, testimony from public agencies, rebuttal by the applicant, requests of continuance or to leave the record open, close of the hearing, close of the record, requests to submit written argument, deliberations, and decision. If you wish to provide testimony, please email it to askinner@lincolncity.org, and it will be read into the record. The email should include your name and address, the hearing that you are providing testimony for, and whether you are testifying in opposition, in support, or are neutral to the hearing in question. So to remind you, the hearing is for file CUP 2020-02. Anyone who's listening who may want to email. That is the end of the preliminary matters and the required statements. So please present the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Chair Crowan. I'm going to share my screen and so that I can show some maps. Maybe it's not working. Yeah. Well, I'm trying to, you should be seeing my desktop. And you're not seeing my desktop? Yeah. I want you to see my laptop desktop because I'm pulling up the maps. So I'm doing. Okay. I'm probably totally confused now. Where is canceling sharing screen? And maybe I just won't, because they're all in the packet. I can't even get there. There we go. Okay. Okay. Well, I'll just proceed with the staff report for now. Okay. As has been stated, this is a conditional use permit application for dredging of a portion of Devil's Lake. The site does not have an address because it is Devil's Lake, and the portion of dredging that is being requested is near D River and Northeast 1st Street. The comprehensive plan designation for the site is General Commercial District. The zoning district is Marine Waterway. The area proposed to be dredged is approximately 6,000 square feet. And surrounding land uses and zones, to the north of the site is Hostetler Park. To the northeast is a restaurant, and both of those are zoned RC, Recreation Commercial. To the south of the site is a restaurant and residences, and those are zoned General Commercial. East is Devil's Lake, also zoned Marine Waterway, and west is a hotel and businesses, and Highway 101. And those areas are zoned General Commercial. The Planning and Community Development Department mailed notice to the owners of all properties within 250 feet, and that notice was mailed on April 15th, 2020. The News Guard published the public hearing notice on April 22nd, 2020. Section 17.60.020 of the Lincoln City Municipal Code gives the Planning Commission authority to approve with conditions, disapprove or revoke conditional use permits subject to the provisions of Chapter 17.60 of the Municipal Code. I previously read into the record the applicable substantive criteria, and I am not going to read those all again. The application was submitted on February 21st, 2020. It was submitted by the Devil's Lake Water Improvement District. They are requesting conditional use permit approval to conduct maintenance dredging of approximately 400 cubic yards of beach sand and surf-driven debris from the bed of the lower 250 to 300 feet of the Devil's Lake.
Henry?
Yes.
Does the area extend bank to bank? Or is it just extending out a distance from the park?
I do not believe that it extends bank to bank, but I will let the applicant confirm that.
Okay.
The city owns the adjacent tax lot 3200, which is Hostetler Park. Devil's Lake Water Improvement District has an easement on a portion of Hostetler Park for the operation, maintenance, repair, etc. of the D River outlet control device and for staging of the district's work in performing such maintenance. The application indicates that the easement and the south bank of Hostetler Park both will be used for staging, and as the base from which the dredging activities will occur. The remainder of the staff report goes on to address in detail all of the criteria that were read into the record. The applicant has included as part of the application the draft joint permit application to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Oregon Department of State Lands, and the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. All of those agencies will have to approve the request. Their approval is pending the city's approval of the conditional use permit, as land use needs to be given before any of those agencies can then give their subsequent approvals. Of course, those approvals will come with conditions not similar to, but as the city's approval may have conditions, those jurisdictions may also have conditions on their staff considers the criterion number 1, that evidence being provided that the applicant has submitted the appropriate applications. Staff considers that criterion being met. The criterion dealing with that the activity shall not represent a source of water pollution. The staff is considering that this criterion is met by acquiring and complying with the permits and the conditions of approval of any of those permits. The filling or dredging activities shall not substantially alter the course of any channel. The applicant has stated in the application that the sediment reduction maintenance project will not appreciably alter any lake or river channel course. Staff considers that criterion is met. Criterion number 4, any fill or dredging spoil area shall be deposited behind a watertight berm. The applicant states that all dredged sand material will be trackhoe removed from the lower lake and deposited upland directly adjacent to the removal site for off-site disposal. Criterion number 5 deals with any portion falling below the mean higher high water or mean high water. And this application is for sediment removal. It does not include any proposed fill, so this criterion is not applicable. Number 6 deals with all the items that need to be included in the application, and all of the items that needed to be included are included. So criterion number 6 is satisfied. The remaining criteria deal with the criteria for approving a conditional use permit, whether or not it's in compliance with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan does not address dredging, except as it relates directly to the Siletz River estuary. So this criteria does not apply to this particular application. The site for the proposed use is adequate in size and shape to accommodate the use in all yards, spaces, etc. Staff report indicates, because of the nature of the proposed work, that adequacy of the site is best determined by asking whether the purposes of the proposal can be met while still meeting the standards for conditional use involving dredging and disposal of dredging spoils. Analysis of the consistency of the proposal with the requirements of section 17.44.040 is presented previously in the staff report and is included for reference. Staff feels that this criterion can be met or is met with the condition of approval that all applicable approvals from the Oregon Department of State Lands and the joint permit application are obtained prior to the commencement of any staging or work activity. Criterion number 3 involves the proposed use and its relation to streets and highways. Staff has concluded that this criterion can be met with a condition of approval requiring a traffic plan to be reviewed and approved by the Lincoln City Public Works Department and Oregon Department of Transportation, one or both as applicable, prior to the commencement of any staging or dredging activity. And that falls in line also with criteria number 4, which is having minimal adverse impact. And again, staff recommends condition of approval for a transportation plan. Criterion number 5 is not applicable, as the site is not historic, scenic, or culturally attributed. So staff recommends that the Planning Commission hold the public hearing, take public testimony, close the public hearing, deliberate, and determine whether the request complies with the criteria. And should the Planning Commission determine that the request complies with the criteria, staff has suggested 2 possible conditions of approval, and those are listed right under recommendation number 1 and number 2, basically a traffic plan, and that the applicant obtain all the necessary permits. And I am ready for any questions.
All right, I have one.
Okay.
This is a conditional use permit that, I get the question is this a conditional use permit that is good for one time only or as needed over a 10-year period? It seems that the application talks about the potential need to do this over different times during a 10-year period. So is this permit to allow it to happen as frequently as necessary in 10 years?
No, that is not the way staff interpreted it. Well, we could make a condition of approval that it was good for 10 years based upon obtaining all additional required permits over that 10-year period of time.
Okay, well that was my confusion, was whether, because it appeared that the application, particularly with the cores, seemed to be multi-year as opposed to a one-shot deal. Maybe it's a question for the applicant when he gets the floor.
Yeah, I took it as one time.
Okay. All right, other questions for staff? Anyone? Okay, I think we're ready to hear from said applicant. Josh?
All right, everybody ready?
We're ready.
Okay, let's see if I can figure out share screen here. Just want to, where is it at? There we go, okay. Share, yay, okay, here we go. So everybody should be seeing an old black and white picture of the D River right now. Are we all on the same page? Okay, so this is a 94 flyover, and please bear with me, some of these things are in and out and sketchy, but you'll start to see how it kind of forms up from going from the ocean, from the D River side, and it's traveling, well, I mean, south and then north up the river, given the orientation, but as the imagery gets better, here's the first one. You can really start to see kind of where the sand was deposited. You know, it's way farther back. It's past the hotel. It's nowhere near impacting the 1st and 3rd Street Canal. I think the date on that one's 2001, so right about 19, 20 years ago. 03 one's worthless. That one you can't really tell much from either. 05, you can start to see where the 1st and 3rd Street, I think it's 1st Street Canal here, starts to get impacted, and it's pushed way past the hotel. You can start to see a lot more visible buildup even coming down here to the, it was the old, I can't remember what the property used to be called, but the current Vivian's property. So that's 05. So we're looking at about 14 years ago now. So that period between 2000-ish and 2005, there was quite a bit deposited there. Could measure it out, but eyeing it up, probably about 75-ish feet, give or take, in less than 5 years. We go here to 07. We can really see it now. We can see how it's building on top. It's coming up. You see the blockages in the canal start. And that's about 07. That's only 2 years later. Now here's 11. That's not a very good picture, but you can still see some of the visualization here. And it's kind of held out in about the same area there. You can kind of see what's happened is we've had some major storm events, and some have even been a few years apart. And a lot of this debris has been stacked and stacked. And you can even see some of the woody debris. And what that has done is when more sediment's been pushed in, even naturally through tidal action, it's been trapped in the lake. And as a result, well, that one's incredibly useless.
Wow.
So here's 15. It's a little bit, and you can start to see down here even where it's coming over to the far end of that restaurant property now. So it's starting to travel out a little bit more of that slug of sediment. That's 2015. So we're looking at right about 5 years ago. So here's 16. We can see a little bit more of that woody debris and some of that stuff coming in, and a little bit more of this canal coming back even on the other side of the cross bridge. And here's 19, and we can see major amounts of sand build up. We have completely beached, exposed areas of dry sand here. We can see the lighter, which we haven't had in years before, even in the previous 20 years. It's extending well past the current Vivian's restaurant property now, almost past House Center Park completely. And that was our last flyover. So our best estimates are that the sedimentation is going to continue occurring. Previous to this, previous to that 20 years of buildup I just showed you, there were solutions in place before these areas and waterways were regulated. They had excavated and had track hose in the water, and they had excavated the entire area to keep it clear with various methods, water jetting and different things. What happened is the areas became more regulated. We had more issues with the lake, more things to work on, endangered species, things like fish passage to worry about as well. So some of these areas had never been evaluated biologically to see if they even had any value. What the district has done over the past few years, has probably about 2 or more years we've been working on this project, has looked at that. We've even had ODFW and other representatives organizations come down on a team effort to evaluate the area. One of our species of concern down there was a Pacific lamprey, being on the threatened, I believe it's on the threatened list right now. I think we ended up finding one of them, and we worked down there most of the day, electroshocking and had boats and lots of personnel. And their designation and their opinion of the area was that it's very dynamic. There's not enough static buildup. There's not enough static area and land, an area without change in there to support any kind of real biotic life, aquatic life, or anything like that, other than intermittent waterfowl. That brings me to some of the next issue. We love our waterfowl. They're great. They're wonderful. They're all over our lake, and we value them. However, when we get an area like this with lower flow, what we've seen happening over the past few years is even on the west side of the 101 bridge, we've had more problems with E. coli. And those have been actually tested for DNA in the past, and many of them came up as waterfowl DNA, very indicative of the area and of an environment like that. So there's always a balance and things to be had. So we've had some more issues like that have occurred from that. I have a couple of pictures here. I popped up. I've been keeping an eye on the area the past couple of years, and this is from the 1st and 3rd Street areas from behind. You see some of the flooding here, and this gets to about, I've measured it at 24 inches or more deep in some of these areas. So I mean, you can see it's heavy.
Is that the south side of the lake?
Correct. This is that kind of that horseshoe canal area right over there.
Okay.
And it is a lower spot. It is susceptible to flooding. But even in the 4 years that I've been managing the district now, I've seen more flooding issues coming back there. And more issues also with the lake being able to drain itself out. So when we do get high water events, when it does get like this, it may take an additional couple of days for the lake to drain out, which is property damage and upsets habitat and just about everything you can imagine in the area right now. And typically that's not what the area was zoned for, that's not what it's made for, and that's why the area and that river area has been maintained, that channel has always been maintained. And we do, the district does have a water right to maintain the dam area around it from bank to bank. And we do that, keep debris off of it, make sure logs and things aren't coming in and out. But nature being as it is, it doesn't matter what we want to do most of the time. I believe, I cannot remember how many tons of woody debris we had removed in the past 2 events just this past year. But it was an immense amount. It was hundreds of tons of logs that came in, and that was maybe only 16 to 24 months of our normal wash-in. I've seen it coming in even more and even worse at this moment. What we're proposing to do, and I heard Chair Crone ask earlier, is we are not actually proposing to excavate this entire bank length to length. What we want to do is stage equipment up here at Hofstadter Park on the north side and be able to dig a channel out from the bank without equipment entering the water, boom length to about 20 feet out in the water. And what that'll do is... Can you put
the map back, or can you put the air photo back up?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. There we go.
Okay.
So right here, here's Hofstadter and the Hofstadter area. And you can see how we get these large accumulations here. And even a lot of our drier materials. What we're proposing to do is excavate this out to 20 feet, 300 feet linear against this bank only, 20 feet out from that northern edge, to be able to remove this material and allow the river channel to flow under the highway bridge. Now, Lincoln City and Devils Lake Water Improvement District for, I don't recall exactly how long, but it's about 10 or 15 years, have been working together on a joint permit to do a very similar activity on the west side of the Highway 101 bridge. And we have a standing permit, which we renew every 5 to 10 years between the city, Oregon Parks and Recreation Department, DEQ, Fish and Wildlife, and all the interested parties to do exactly this. And we go over there 1 to 2 times a year, generally speaking, depending on tidal activity, debris, storms, and we maintain this channel right here next to the wayside. And I don't know how many of you were around the last year or two and saw the amount of damage that one storm did to the hotels, to the properties, to the underneath of the Kylo's restaurant, and even to the Wayside Park. We are dealing with a lot of regular natural activity that's very destructive. So I know we stay very busy just on that west side, and watching this happen, it's very clear that we need to do something about the east side as well. And the district is trying to make that a formal permitted agreement, so everybody knows what we're doing, why we're doing it, and that we're not interrupting habitat and environment. We are improving it. If you look at this, this is fish passage for several species of salmon that run through Devil's Lake, and 50,000 pair of those are genetically distinct to only our lake. And this will definitely improve fish passage. It won't be, it'll be better than them jumping across East Devil's Lake Road like some of them currently do. So it's really a fairly simple operation from our standpoint, but I know there's probably some questions out there, so I will yield the floor to anything that anyone would like to ask.
I have questions. So I find it kind of curious that you're not proposing to do a little more extensive dredging, particularly with the impact to that channel to the south, that canal. So I'm curious, have you done any modeling to understand what, once you dig this, what essentially will be a new thalweg through there, how that deposit that backs up against the southern part of that channel will be impacted? Do you expect it to move any of that, or?
We actually do. That's our idea behind having the standing emergency permit is that we can start from square one. And if we can get this approved, this will be easier to approve through the U.S. Army Corps and DEQ and DSL as a maintenance activity for this limited removal amount. Once we can do this, maybe we'll do this for one, maybe 2 years. And during that time, we would like to work on a larger permit to be able to do maybe a larger one-time removal. However, that's cost intensive as well. There are dredging options and things out there, but we do not have a lot of funding at the moment to even pursue probably a larger project like that. One good thing about that area is that we do have an agreement with DSL and ODFW that the storm debris, the things that are obviously storm debris, they're not fish habitat that have been deposited, they're new that we can remove. And we have done that with Lincoln City, and Lincoln City's been splitting the bill with us on keeping the debris out of that canal in particular. And we've been hooking up the logs and taking them out from the other side, so we're really disturbing things. But no, that is a concern of ours for sure, and it is our hopes that some of the material sloughs off, and if it is a maintenance activity, that possibly we can go out there more than once a year, and that material may slough off more with the hydrology coming down the lake, especially in our higher flow times. We're going to try and time it out permitting wise, of course, with the spring rains to have our highest flow to be able to flush out as much sediment as possible.
So the dredging you're scheduling this in August, which I'm going to assume is your lowest flow time.
Yeah.
Which probably makes it easier to dredge at that period. But you then, I guess, run the risk that you're going to get that material that's to the south sloughing right in and filling in what you've dredged before you get the spring rains to move it on out.
Correct. If we do a first excavation, we can get on that drier material easier with less disturbance to the bank and the shore, because we want to disturb that as little as possible, which is why we're not going down into the lake to do the work. But that just gives us the best there. That's our best for tonnage. That's our best removal. And aquatic organisms and things too, they'll be out in the wetter areas and not so much the drier. So, and like I said, if that does happen, it does slough back in, that's the idea behind us having it as more of a maintenance activity like we do on the other side of the bridge, is we'll go back out and we'll dig it again.
Okay. I'll ask one more of mine and then let others jump in before I get too deep in the weeds, no pun intended. I noticed in the application you said something that you were attaching a material sediment analysis, but I didn't see that. I know that you said it's predominantly beach fans, but when you did the coring or the sediment analysis, did you come up with any red flags of anything that's in that material that you need to be aware of?
No, I can tell you positively that the last analysis that was performed on that was completely inert.
Okay. Anybody else have questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Kim.
So I'm going to start right out by talking about my naivety of water flows and hydrology and all that kind of stuff. So I apologize if my question seems odd, but so if you dredge out there on the north side of the lake before you get to 101, that'll increase the water flow out to the ocean, correct?
That is the idea.
Okay. So what happens on the other side of 101 in that sandy area before Kyleos and on out? Is there not the possibility of more sediment just settling in there and closing up on that side? And
we have an emergency removal permit on the other side of that bridge. So if it does pile up, we will exercise that permit and we'll remove the sediment from the other side of the bridge under the current standing permit.
So what's the prediction? I mean, it logically would seem to me that you will have to do that when you open up water flow faster. It's just going to carry stuff over to that side, I would assume, right?
Essentially, this is what's happened the past 20 years. It's bounced back and forth, and now it's shifted completely to one side of the bridge, and that's the side of the bridge we don't have any real options to remove this volume of sediment to keep the water flowing through.
Okay, and then another kind of question, or maybe more so a comment. In addition to all of the environmental benefits, wildlife, fishery benefits, it just seems that it just will make this whole area look a whole lot better in the long run, I would assume too, right? I mean, from aesthetics to the city standpoint.
I certainly hope so. All the feedback that I've received through the district so far has been very appreciative after every debris removal we've done down there. Especially the last one. As you can see, it looks much cleaner now than it did in that flyover.
Great, thank you. I don't have any other questions at the moment.
Okay. Anybody else have questions?
I do.
Okay, Marcy.
Hey Josh, could you flip back to that first image that you showed us that was about 20 years ago of what this looks like?
Oh, okay, yeah, this thing. Oh man, the first one? Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Well,
so
hold on. There you go. That one,
yeah.
01.
So I remember when D River looked like this, and I didn't realize that the reason it's kind of gotten down to just a dribble is because of that massive amount of settlement there that's essentially an island. And my question is, you know, you kind of explained how it used to be maintenance, but then it hasn't been in about 20 years. Just from your perspective, because I don't know much about sediment buildup and different geology and stuff, how big of a project is that to get it back to to this, where it is maintenance and could be regularly maintenance? Because that seems huge, and that the environmental impacts would be massive.
Well, it's not. Yeah, it's not something that's without, you know, completely out of our reach. That's for sure. And like I said, we will.
Right, like financially, it's huge, but like I mean.
Well, I mean, yes and no. I hate to put a dollar amount on it, but I would say that's probably a sub $100,000 project. But our district budget is very small for what we do. Mainly we're mainly outreach budget. But the city's been helping us with a few things. We've had great luck with the Select Tribal Charitable Contribution Fund helping us with wildlife preservation efforts and things like this as well. So it really just takes the time to line up those partnerships and the stakeholders and bring the people together to formulate a plan. And that is definitely what we're going to be doing after we get a maintenance one in, and that's our rationale behind putting through the emergency type permit beforehand. So at the very least, if we get a complete blockage, we can go out in a limited fashion, not disturb very much land, and maintain the flow out of the river on both sides at the very least, and then pursue that larger kind of project and program once we have a little bit more time and footing.
Right. So you say it's kind of now is like an acute situation, and then gradually kind of have a plan to address it to where it could be regularly maintenance. Because I mean, that flooding, all those residents that live there, that must be, I mean, if I experienced that and I knew it was because of a bunch of sand in the middle of this, I would just be sick, you know?
Miles, I see your hand up, but let me ask one question associated with what Marcy asked. Getting funding for this, Josh, because, I mean, if you have an ESU species of salmon utilizing this, this river and lake, have you thought about going to the state or NOAA to get funding for habitat enhancement?
I have went to a couple of these grant programs. Unfortunately, a lot of them are dry. And what I've ran into is many of them are geared towards larger projects. And as a result of that, I sit through a lot of watershed council meetings and other things to try and see exactly where the money and the funding is going and how to get onto it. But there's not a lot of smaller grants like that exist, unfortunately. So I find myself pursuing things on the local level more often than not. Generally, you know, for these sub-$1 million projects, and it's really not. There's a great benefit to be had out of these things, but a lot of folks, when they have a lot of grant money and a lot of grant dollars, they don't want to grant, you know, $100,000 projects. They want to grant 30, you know, $10 or $20 million projects or whatever it comes out to.
Yeah, I understand that. I just, you know, sometimes they want a small project with a big win to tout.
For sure. But if you, absolutely, if you know of anything just offhand or any available information, we are always more than willing to look at that.
Okay. Miles, did you have a question?
I had a comment. the property was used as a boat marina and a swimming hole before the community center. And in 1965, you put a boat in there next to that motel, and that was Calkins Marina. And
Calkins Marina?
Calkins.
Calkins, that's what I thought.
And before that, they put in gas stocks on Hostetler Park and restaurants, and there was the official swimming pool where neighbors my age who lived here permanently took swimming lessons in the lake, and it was blocked off, and every year the folks would put up an earthen dam so that they could trap water in there. But it has gone through lots of reiterations since the 30s, and I can remember driving my boat to the bridge by where those cars are crossing and tying it up there, walking under the bridge and up to Kylo's to have cocktails there on a Friday night.
All right. Other questions for Josh? Okay, I have one more big one. It looks like from your plant survey, there's a concentration of parrot feather down in this area, which is an invasive species, and it also reproduces by fragmentation. So I'm wondering what kind of mitigation you have planned for the expected disturbance to those populations that are going to be there, and also how you'll treat the material that you pull out that will also contain that plant once you decide to put it someplace else.
We will, with any luck, have that eradicated by the time this project takes place. We've currently contracted with Aquatechnics, which is a CPRO company of Seattle, Washington. We've been down here, and that's who provided the bio-based survey from 2019 in the packet to identify that. So that is supposed to take place here early May. But the caveat to that is that plant requires a resurvey, and what I've been doing is going out in the lake and resurveying and seeing where it's at, rechecking all these areas that we've identified it at. What I've seen is I have not seen it come back in many of these areas yet. Now, granted, our water temperature just turned 60 degrees, so we are at that crux to watch it, and as it gets warmer, it may reappear in some more of these areas. But from the look of what I see, I don't think that even the scale of what we identified at I believe that was late summer last year we did that, so kind of the peak, almost when it was starting to senesce, was when we went out and saw that. But to answer your question, if there is any in the excavated material, I'll be on site with staff, we'll evaluate it, we will check pre-excavation to see if there is any in the area previously, and if there is, we'll make best efforts to remove that and destroy it. It's very prolific. You can't just leave it near a water body. You have to burn it or just send it into space. But it has to go away. And if there is a lot, like I said, best efforts will be made to remove it. If for some reason it's very prolific, and I don't recall it being very prolific in that excavation area, it was identified, but not as much as some of the other areas. We'll do something like a boom downstream to collect it, so it doesn't run out or go any farther.
Okay. And where's the fill to be placed?
The fill to be placed right now, we are planning on trucking it basically across Highway 101 and down to the beach. Last I checked, there were some sand-starved areas that the Parks and Recreation Department and some other people said that they might want it since it's clean, inert fill. However, Basically, anyone who wants the clean fill, we can take it to, as long as we or someone else isn't reselling it or making money off it. That's the only caveat that I've had in conversations with the other permitting agencies, is they just don't want it. For example, if Devil's Lake Rock wanted to come and take all the sand out, they don't want them to take all the sand to their facility then sell it.
Right.
So
you're going to stockpile 450 cubic yards of sand?
No, it'll only be stockpiled for dewatering, and then it'll go into a tandem. Like I said, it'll go to an off, whoever wants it. Basically, we have 2 or 3 options right now to take it to, and we just have not selected, whom wants it. We'll most likely go to the closest one, and if that works out well, like I said, that'll be literally across the street.
Okay, so you're not anticipating having all of that fill on your hands and no place to put it?
No. It'll be, like I said, it'll be stockpiled just by loader until it's put in and trucked.
Okay. Thank you, Josh.
No problem.
Any other questions? Anyone?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I have a quick clarification. The way I read the conditional use permit application is that this was a request one time to dredge 450 cubic yards. And Madam Chair, you asked a question about this continuing over 10 years.
Yes.
John, can you provide some clarification on that for purposes of what is being approved?
We would like approval for a multi-year permit for the purposes of this. Otherwise that lands us applying for a conditional use permit every time we want to do this, correct?
Yes.
And we've spent immense amount of staff time and resources in the past 2 years between almost 6 regulatory agencies so far. So we would definitely like to pursue a multi-year permit.
So would that involve 450 cubic yards per year?
Correct. That's the plan, or yeah, per year.
Okay.
I'm trying to recall. The core permit is lengthy, so I'm trying to get that ahead of me here. I can't remember the exact language in that for the volume.
The 450 is what you put in the city's conditional use permit application.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to figure out if that's what I put in the core too. Just how I worded it, but yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
So Anne Marie, if this approval was for not more than 450 cubic yards per
year
dredging, because it may not happen every year.
Correct.
It's obviously going to be dependent on climate and how the sand moves in and deposits in the rivers. So they could go a couple years and not need it, and then need it again.
Right.
For consecutive years. So would that work, Josh, if it was a not to exceed amount in the multi-year permit?
I believe so. Yeah. Yeah.
Just for the obviously a conditional use does run with the land. So really the conditions you're imposing should be, as Anne-Marie mentioned earlier, you have to have the permits from all the other agencies each time that you engage in this activity. And if you place a limit, obviously that gets you closer to it being maintenance than a one-time thing.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
All right, any other comments? Anne Marie, have you received any emails for testimony on this topic?
I have not. I just checked and I have none.
Can David tell us if anyone's in the council chambers?
Okay. So I'll ask the planning commissioners one more time. Any other questions that you have for the applicant? Okay. ORS section 197.763 paragraph 6A states that upon request, the commission must either grant a continuance for no less than 7 days or hold the record open for no less than 7 days to permit any participant an opportunity to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence. Is anybody who participated, I guess that's you, Josh,
Yeah.
want to request a continuance to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence, or request that the record be kept open? No?
No.
Okay. So do I have a motion to close the public hearing and the record?
I have a question real quick, though. At the end of the staff report, I'm looking at page 70 of the packet. It says the staff recommendation is to continue the public hearing to May 19th, 2020 at 6 p.m. I don't know if that becomes an issue.
Why?
That is for the next, the procedures, I think. We're on page 68.
Okay.
Did you skip ahead, Kim?
Well, yeah, I thought so. Maybe. Oh, that's the next. Is that the next one? Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Never mind. Forget it.
Okay.
For the record, Chair, no one has appeared in the meeting room. No one has emailed any comments, so we have no public comment at the public hearings, except for that of the applicant.
Correct.
I move that we close the hearing and the public record.
I second it.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. The public hearing and the record is closed. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. All right. Can we deliberate? Does anybody have any questions for city staff or the city attorney? No? Okay. Any deliberation, thoughts, concerns? Anybody?
I have a thought. I agree with what Marcy was stating, as well as Miles, I believe. And, you know, if we go back to that 2001 picture, I think it would be a fantastic step to be able to get that area of D Lake and D River back in a condition that has an appearance somewhat similar to that. So I think this is a great thing to do for many reasons.
All right. Anyone else? Any comments?
I just kind of agree with Kim on that. You know, I think there's environmental benefits. There's all kind of benefits to doing this. And, you know, like Miles was saying, you know, it used to be a recreational center. And, you know, I don't know, after there are changes and it's better, you know, if it's still environmentally friendly, I think, you know, it could be a good place to have a little bit of recreation. And, you know, I could see it being, you know, a nice eye-catching, you know, fixture right in the middle of Lincoln City that we've kind of just let get all bogged up with sand.
For a while there, after the restaurant opened, someone rented paddle boards at that location, but it got so much sand in there that they couldn't go anywhere but up the lake.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other comments? So the staff report included 2 conditions for approval. One of them was that the applicant would file copies of all the applicable approvals and permits from other agencies prior to starting the project. And the second was to submit a traffic plan to the appropriate agencies that would explain control of traffic for the movement of the dump trucks. I think I recall there's in excess of 100 trips of trucks moving back and forth with the fill material. And remember, this is August, so maybe this August it won't be as crowded, but August is typically a very popular time and lots of traffic on 101. So if I can get a motion from someone and considering those two conditions for approval.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All right. So there's a motion on the floor to approve the conditional use permit with the inclusion of the conditions included in the staff report, or for the applicant to get all approvals and permits from the other agencies and submit a traffic plan and approval of that traffic plan from the agencies involved. And that is for CUP 2020-02. James, would you like to do a roll call? Where did James go?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. I couldn't find my
Here you are.
screen. Okay, just a moment. Marcy Baker,
Yes.
Tim Blackerby,
Yes.
Patty Crowan,
Yes.
Lenny Nelson,
Yes.
Miles Schlesinger,
Yes.
Max Smith.
Yes.
That is 6 yes votes and no votes.
Okay. This is a tentative decision of the Planning Commission. Staff will prepare a final order for adoption at the next available meeting. Hopefully it's not 2 months from now. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you all.
Okay, next up is ZOA 2020-01 procedures. This is, what is this? This is what is this? Oh, okay. So this is the general description, and then there's types underneath, I assume. This is an ordinance amendment to organize reviews into procedure types of type 1, 2, 3, or 4 with associated applications and adding a chart showing each. And is this the one that you wanted to defer to the next meeting?
It is. I just needed a little more time, and the city attorney definitely needs to review it. So I wanted to afford him enough time to do a thorough review before it comes to public hearing.
Okay, good idea. So do we need a motion to do that?
Yes, please.
Could I have a motion to defer ZOA 2020-01 to, do you want the next meeting, or there, I don't have that page up in front of me, so.
Yeah, we'll be good with the next meeting, May 19th.
19th? Okay. Can I get a motion?
I move to defer ZOA 2020-01 procedures to our next meeting on May 19th to continue the public hearing.
Okay. Second, anyone?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it's moved. Okay, now we're to ZOA 2020-04, permanent signs. It is now 7:45. Does anybody need a break? No? Okay. So it is 7:45. The hearing is now open to accept public comment on file ZOA 2020-04, permanent signs. This public hearing concerns a city-initiated proposal to amend Title 17 zoning, section 17.08.010 definitions, to amend chapter 17.72 sign regulations, and to update references to chapter 17.72 throughout Title 17. Commissioners, are there any abstentions or disqualifications based on conflict of interest or personal bias? Seeing none. Okay. This is a pretty short script here, James. If you wish to provide testimony, please email it to askinner@lincolncity.org and it will be read into the record. The email should include your name and address, the hearing that you are providing testimony for, and whether you are testifying in opposition, in support, or neutral to the hearing in question. Staff, would you please present the report?
Thank you. Okay. This particular ordinance amendment has been in the works for over a year. And it was, the main impetus behind it really has to do with feather banners. And this all started before my time, before I was an employee at the city. And the sign ordinance was amended a couple of years ago to remove all content related references. And at that time, there was a provision added to allow a certain number of feather banners with the sunset clause. And since the time of that sunset clause, the sunset has come and gone twice, and the feather banner clause has been extended. So what I did in redoing the sign ordinance is I didn't really redo it as in redoing all the requirements. Instead, what I did was I separated permanent signs and temporary signs. So the permanent sign provisions are proposed to remain in the zoning ordinance, which is Title 17, Chapter 17.72. And the rules and regulations for temporary signage then are being removed from land use, and they're being added to Chapter 9.34, which is another title of the Lincoln City Municipal Code. Currently, Chapter 9.34 contains all the rules and regulations for temporary signage, and by also having some of the temporary sign rules in the zoning ordinance, that means we have them in two different places, and it can present a bit of a conflict. So this ordinance attempts to clean that up. To clarify, the Planning Commission does not give any recommendations on any titles of the code other than Title 16 and Title 17. Title 17 being the zoning ordinance. So I included the draft of the temporary sign provisions just for your information so that you would know that they are still somewhere in the code, but they just aren't for your consideration here tonight. So for your consideration here tonight is the permanent signage. There were no substantive changes made to the allowances for permanent signage, meaning the current sign ordinance allows up to 100 square feet of permanent signage based upon the business frontage, and this proposes to keep that the same. The main substantive difference in this ordinance versus what is currently in place has to do with different regulations for 3 different pearls. Right now, the Taft Village Core, the Nelscott Plan District, and the Ocean Lake Plan District, all 3 have different permanent sign rules than the other commercial zones in the city. At the workshops that were held, the joint workshops with Planning Commission and City Council, it was my understanding as the outcome of those workshops that City Council, or that Planning Commission and City Council at that time of those workshops wished to see some consistency in the permanent sign regulations throughout the city, rather than having 3 of the pearls having their own regulations and the other commercial districts having more allowances for permanent signage. So this ordinance strikes the sign regulations in Taft, Ocean Lake, and Nelscott, and replaces those with a reference to subject to the provisions of Chapter 17.72. So essentially, they would then be allowed the 100 square feet, up to 100 square feet, based upon their street business frontage, and the same height of a freestanding sign that's currently allowed in the sign code, which is 20 feet or 25 feet. The height is not changing, it's just staying what it is. And this ordinance also adds some diagrams for sign area measurements to help staff in interpreting. It adds some example pictures, and it revises the definitions so that hopefully I included a definition for everything that's in the ordinance, and thus eliminating any questions when we're administering the ordinance and someone says, what does this mean? And we go to definitions, and hopefully there will now be one there for that. And that is essentially what it does. Oh, and then it provides standards for illumination. The current sign ordinance has no standards for illumination. It basically just says it's allowed, but it doesn't say how much. And it says it can't, it's not supposed to produce glare in the right of way or into adjacent residences. So it's very subjective. And I worked with a national sign organization to come up with these metrics for illumination, and therefore it provides a clear and objective standard. So if someone wants an illuminated sign, they simply submit the permit request for that, and they provide the cut sheets and the manufacturer's specifications and data showing that it meets the metrics in the code, and then it's very simple to approve or disapprove based upon the metrics. And so the ultimate goal in all of this is to provide a clear, consistent, objective sign ordinance that is consistent throughout the city, that staff can administer and understand. Hopefully I've accomplished that, and also accomplished the goals of Planning Commission and City Council. We shall see. So I'm ready for any questions.
Questions? Anyone? Okay, I have a couple.
Okay.
Did you define original art displays? On page 78, item H, it is an exemption, I believe. Original art display.
I'm pretty sure I have a definition for that, but let me yes. Original art display is, and that's something that didn't change. the current ordinance, this is the definition that's in the current ordinance.
Okay.
And I just transferred that over.
Okay.
And the current ordinance also exempts original art display. So again, I just transferred that over.
So that's my bad. I apologize. Can you clarify sign position vis-a-vis right-of-ways, sidewalks? I was having a hard time understanding the placement as it relates to right-of-way.
Let me get to that section.
It's on it. You talk about it on the top of page 7, the packet, page 79.
Okay. Well, I don't specifically allow or prohibit it in right-of-way. Instead, all signs need to be placed such that they comply with the clear vision area requirements, which is generally a 10-foot by 50-foot triangle.
Okay.
That can't have anything taller than 3 feet in it. And then the other restriction for placement is ADA accessibility. So this language provides the way that if or when the city is able to work with ODOT and obtain authority or jurisdiction over the right-of-way, then permanent signage could be placed in the right-of-way, provided it meets all of the ADA accessibility requirements and doesn't hinder pedestrian traffic or vehicular traffic, etc. I'm trying to thread the needle here, not wanting to have to go back and do another sign ordinance amendment, which I may have to, but.
So, but currently it would have to be approved by ODOT, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Or commissioners, remember, in order to make an application for anything under Title 17 to process an application, you have to be the owner of the property. So no one is going to get a sign under Title 17 in the right-of-way. It's not your property. You're not going to be able to make application for it. So under Chapter 9, I suspect, because it's there now, I believe that says no signs in the right-of-way, that's probably where it's going to be until such time as, if it ever happens, we take control. And then I don't really know, I wouldn't be counting on signs in the right-of-way. If they are, they're probably going to need to comply with ODOT type standards, which is, they have to be above a certain height in order to not obstruct pedestrians and that kind of stuff. So, but I don't think it's going to be in 2017.
Okay.
Well, but doesn't the city currently have jurisdiction of the right-of-way in part of town down in Taft?
Yeah, there is some portion. There is an agreement, but we're not issuing permits. And the code currently says no signs in the right-of-way.
Yeah.
Okay. On that same page, under maintenance, item B, it talks about permanent signs that are faded, torn, damaged, ripped, every adjective you could come up with. Must have immediate maintenance performed or be removed immediately, but no later than 30 days following the occurrence of the fading, tearing, damage, uncleanliness, or what?
Well, then it would be a
Sign? Will the city remove the sign, or
The
what happens?
city has done that. The city building official has declared signs to be dangerous and ordered them to be taken down. I know that happened at least twice.
Okay.
And it would then be a code violation. So they'd be issued a citation.
Okay. I have more, but if anybody else has questions, jump in. Okay. On page 98, okay, let me back up before I get into this. You included the temporary sign information, but that's not what we're supposed to comment on, right?
Correct.
Okay, then never mind. What about portable signs?
That's all part of temporary.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else have other questions on signs?
Well, I do about that, and I'm kind of wondering why it was moved to where it is out of Title 17. I see that there were temporary signs in Title 9 right now, but there were things in there that we participated in discussing in the joint session. So, I mean, I guess I kind of understand that, but was that the intent the whole time, was for those things to be moved to Title 9 to where we were not really discussing those? Because you did say this was all kind of initiated because of the feather banners, and then now it's, well, we're not talking about those.
Well, in my opinion, and I'll let Richard Apicella weigh in on this as well, but in my opinion, a temporary sign really isn't a land use.
That makes sense because it's portable.
Right. Permanent is there all the time, and so that's land use. And so from just a planning perspective, that is why I felt it was more appropriate for temporary signs to be in Title 9. And Richard, didn't you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's probably not considered development in the sense that we all think of development. Usually Title 17 is addressing uses and alteration of the land, construction. I realize that you could take the position that a temporary use is still a use and therefore can be regulated under the land use code. But a lot of times what we're talking about are temporary occurrences and not on the property owner's property. So dealt with more like a nuisance code. So I think it's a judgment call, and I've seen it handled both ways. I like what Anne Marie has done. You know, you're going to have reasonable people differ on this, but I think that handling it more like a nuisance issue is probably better than handling like it's development. So.
Well, I think one of the things that I just find sort of curious is that temporary, the time limit of temporary seems to only really be defined in this section for real estate signs or perhaps for campaign signs. But I mean, there are businesses in town that have temporary signs up that have been there for years. So how do you define temporary in terms of the time limit? I mean, can a motel or a hotel that puts up a temporary wrap sign, is that considered their permanent sign?
No.
It's not supposed to be. And we have an enforcement issue when it comes to signage in the city. And that's what this is all about. Trying to stop people from using temporary signage as permanent signage, trying to reduce the amount of temporary signage that goes up without any I mean, again, it's a nuisance is what it is.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
And turning it into, putting in chapter 9 is kind of turning it over to the police department to deal with, as opposed to the planning department.
sure, and that makes sense to me, but if we want the police to deal with it, we need to give them the structure that they would need. For example, a time limit. You know, how long can a temporary sign be used before they can enforce some action? And
yeah, and I have yet to jump in and rework 934 based on what Anne Marie has suggested. And it's not going to be exactly as Anne Marie has suggested, because I'm going to do exactly what you suggested. And I'm going to think of it in terms of not enforcement by planning, but enforcement by the police.
yeah,
And they're going to want some certain, granted, they're not going to be crimes, but a violation that's a significant violation, and such that code enforcement and the police will be looking for certain things in clarity as to when things are in fact a violation.
yeah. That, I think that will be really helpful, Richard. I appreciate that. Okay. Any other comments or questions, concerns about the sign issue, ordinance change?
I did have a note about on packet page 82 under area number 2 there under A. It says for buildings with 2 or more tenant spaces, each tenant space is allowed a minimum of 25 square feet attached sign area.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just kind of curious about the minimum. So does that mean like it is reserved for each tenant that they're going to have access to that 25 square feet? Or is that saying their sign needs to be at least that big?
No, thank you. And maybe I need to reword that a little. It goes to the amount of attached signage that a tenant space is allowed. And if you have, it's based on the lineal feet. So there's no limit to the number of attached signs on the building, but it is subject to the aggregate total area of limitation. And the aggregate total area is that you can't exceed 100 square feet, regardless of the number of tenant spaces and regardless of the amount of frontage. Maybe I do need to reword that.
That's a little confusing.
That is confusing.
Because then I would think that
The intent, the intent is that each tenant space, regardless of their lineal footage, has at least 25.
At least 25. So it is that the first thing I stated, that it is reserved for that tenant to use.
Yeah.
Which compared to some of the districts right now, it would be shared space and it's first come, first serve on a building.
Correct.
You're trying to address that. Okay, that's
right.
Kind of what I thought, but I was a little curious because if you had 5 tenants in a building, then but 100 maximum, then would that limit to 20 feet for each tenant? I mean, I don't know if there are buildings with more than 5 tenants, but I would imagine it's possible.
Yeah. So I'm going to reword that because you're right. So thank you for bringing that up. I worked on this a lot, and I had James and Weston read it, and this is like the 4th iteration of this. So, and it's still not right.
And the only other question I had, is on page 83 on roof signs, and it says 1 per building, and I was just kind of curious the definition. I mean, I guess I could go back to definitions, but I don't remember one for what roof sign. Is that just like straight on top of the building?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if there's more than 1 tenant in a building, is there just 1 sign?
Yep. 1 building, 1 roof sign per building.
but an unlimited number
whatever
of
the-
attached signs per building with the maximum of 100 square.
Right.
Okay.
And if there were more than, one tenant in the building, they could all get together and share the roof sign.
So would that roof sign, any tenant could apply to get that sign permit, or would it have to be a building owner that would approve if there's only one available?
Whomever.
First come, first
Up to
served.
the tenants and the landlord and the building owner to work that out.
Same way our sandwich board permit works right now in Ocean Lake.
Right, yeah.
Other questions? Okay, so you've got one correction, it looks like, to work on a little bit.
Yeah, 1772-100, clarify the area measurement per tenant space.
Okay, has any testimony been submitted?
Look. Nope. No testimony.
I'm crushed that people are not just sitting on the edge of their seats watching this meeting.
David, is anyone in the council chambers? Do you have any comments on the sign ordinance, David?
You take yours straight to the council. Okay, so
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if you had been around in the 90s and saw the sign things, you would not be unhappy that there was nobody there screaming and yelling at you. Done that.
okay, I'll count my blessings.
Yes, you should.
Is there a motion to close the public hearing and the record?
Also moved since I'm unmuted.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, okay. What's the pleasure of the commission on this one? No, don't everybody speak at once.
I think it's miles better than having a different sign code, 4 different sign codes for throughout town. So I think Anne Marie did a pretty good job with the notes and all the discussions we've had putting it together.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'll be interested to see what city council does with this. But I think that, you muddled through all of those meetings and sort of came out with something that makes sense. So good for you, Anne Marie. Yes, Miles.
I have one question. What about historical signs? Are they limited to 100 square feet, or I'm thinking, for example, of the original Dorchester house and how it still looks the same as it did when it was a small place and they had the restaurant on the first floor.
That falls under non-conforming. So they don't have to go take their sign down if it's over 100 square feet.
Thank you.
So with the adjustments that Marcy suggested, do I have a motion to forward this recommendation to city council?
I'll motion we forward it to city council.
Thank you, Josh. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mac. All in, I guess we need a roll call vote, or can we just all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Any opposed? All right. Send it on. Progress. Progress. Yeah.
Moving forward. Thanks, Anne Marie.
Woo!
Yeah, thanks for the good work.
That one was fun. Okay, onward. You're getting there, guys. Thanks for hanging in. It is now 8:15, and the hearing is now open to accept public comment on file ZOA 2020-02, parking and landscaping. I have to get a little more light in here so I can read. This public hearing concerns a city-initiated proposal to amend Title 17 zoning, Section 17.08.010 definitions, to amend Chapter 17.56 off-street parking and loading, to replace Section 17.52.100 landscaping with a new Chapter 17.55 landscaping, and to update references to Chapters 17.55 and 17.56 throughout Title 17. Commissioners, are there any abstentions or disqualifications based on a conflict of interest or personal bias? Right. No? Okay. If you wish to provide testimony, please email it to askinner@lincolncity.org and it will be read into the record. The email should include your name and address, the hearing that you are providing testimony for, and whether you are testifying in opposition, in support, or neutral to the hearing in question. Staff, please present your report.
Thank you. Okay. Currently, off-street parking requirements are located in one chapter, and landscaping requirements, for the most part, are located in a section under a chapter for supplementary regulations and exceptions. And no one, meaning the public, ever thinks to look for landscaping requirements in supplementary regulations and exceptions. So the first part of this ordinance is just creating a chapter for landscaping, simply to make it easier for just the layperson and those unfamiliar with our code to know exactly where landscaping requirements are located. The second portion, off-street parking requirements, are scattered throughout Title 17. There are some different parking requirements in the design standards. There are parking requirements in Ocean Lake, Taft, and Nelscott. And then there are parking requirements in, of course, in the parking requirement chapter. There are some different parking requirements in the supplementary and supplementary regulations and exceptions dealing with RVs. So again, it makes it very difficult for anyone to make sure that they have addressed all of the parking requirements. So this, hopefully, I've captured where all those are and removed them from wherever they are and put them all into the chapter dealing with off-street parking. The requirements haven't changed. So there haven't been any substantive changes to the parking requirements or the landscaping requirements. It's more just reorganizing it all so that the requirements, all the parking requirements are in one chapter and all the landscaping requirements are in their own chapter. With that, however, I will then make one exception, and that exception has to do with the parking requirement, the minimum parking requirement for multi-unit structures or apartment buildings. And this request came about from the Urban Renewal and Economic Development Department and some developers with whom that department is working for affordable housing projects. And the request was made to include in this a reduction or to split up the parking requirement for apartment buildings. Currently, it is 1.5 spaces per unit, and the request was made to keep that 1.5 spaces per unit for those units that are 2 bedrooms or more, and lower it to 1 space for studios or 1-bedroom units. So that requested change is included in this ordinance amendment for the Planning Commission to consider, and that is a substantive change. The other parking requirements that you see in here are not, none of it is a change. It's just copy and paste from the requirements that we have now and just reorganizing everything into a more succinct and easily understood fashion. And landscaping is very similar. In the landscaping section, the landscaping requirements for single-family dwellings and duplexes are peppered throughout the landscaping requirements for other development and multifamily. And so I reorganized that so that all of the landscaping requirements were in one section for single family and duplex, and all of the landscaping requirements for everything else are in a different section, so that you can just reference one section rather than having to go back and forth between sections. And again, removed all the references to landscaping and parking in Taft, Nelscott, and Ocean Lake, and replace them with a reference to the landscaping requirements and parking requirements in chapters 17.55 and 56 respectively. And I think that's it.
Anne-Marie, does that change substantively the landscaping and parking requirements that were originally in Nelscott and Taft, those plans?
Yes, so they have all been moved into parking and landscaping.
They've been moved, but the requirements haven't changed.
Correct.
Okay. You're just reordering, you're just moving things to different chapters, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I'm assuming that on page 116 that talks about type 2 and type 3 procedures, you're foreshadowing that that other amendment that we're going to see after Richard has a chance to take a look at it.
I am, yes.
Those things. Okay. Okay. Can I just ask a clarification question? What's an eco roof?
What's a what?
Eco roof.
Oh, it's a living roof. So a green roof, a roof that has plants. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'd never heard the term. All right, any questions on the landscaping and parking?
I have a question.
Jim, do you have your hand up?
Trying to use the technology here.
Good.
And so I'm just curious, and there's a lot to read through, and it had to have been a ton of work for you and your team, Anne-Marie. So thank you for doing that. I'm just curious. I notice how the pearls are always called out, and of course, Rhodes End has separately, kind of a separate area. Bottom line, is the parking and the landscaping regulations consistent across all of Lincoln City, or
it will be with
Rhodes
this
End
amendment
too? I guess is where I'm coming.
It will be with this ordinance amendment.
Okay.
And that was one of the things that came out of, and I could have lumped this in with the design standards ordinance amendment, but I didn't want one ordinance amendment to get too bogged down, so I split them up. But that was one of the things also that came out of the joint workshops, or that I felt came out of it. So hopefully I'm interpreting Planning Commission's and City Council's intent correctly. But it seemed to me as though that they were looking for consistent standards throughout the city rather than having one set of standards for Taft and a different set of standards for Ocean Lake, et cetera. So that's what this does for landscaping and parking. It levels the playing field, sort of, as a good, nice cliche term. And so the requirements that were in design standards for parking lot landscaping have been moved from the design standard chapter, and they're now in the landscaping chapter. And the requirements for not the number, but where parking should be located and the perimeter buffers around parking have been moved from Ocean Lake, Taft, Scott, and design standards, and instead placed into the parking requirement chapter, so that every development has to, in any zone, has to follow those requirements rather than just the ones in Taft or just the ones in the general commercial zone. So again, it makes things consistent so that our parking lots for any development throughout the city will look the same, rather than having one parking lot in Taft with a 3-foot buffer and another parking lot in general commercial with a 10-foot buffer. And you see what I'm?
Yeah, no, that's what I was hoping.
Yeah.
To do. So thank you. And I guess follow up to that in terms of related to landscaping, because parking doesn't change as much. In terms of the landscaping standards, what happens when, and this does apply to residential and commercial, right?
It does.
Yeah.
There's one.
What happens when a residential person eventually lets their landscaping go to a point where it doesn't comply? That just becomes a code violation enforcement. Is that correct?
Yes. And there is a different portion of the municipal code, a different title that deals more specifically with property maintenance and nuisance properties, specifically with landscaping. And Richard probably knows more about that than I do, but and yes, that becomes a code enforcement issue.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So, Anne-Marie, as you brought these things all together from the various areas and are making them consistent, were there any conflicts between requirements? And I'm thinking specifically parking requirements within residential areas, say Millscott versus Rhodes End, that you had to make a call on which parking requirement you would go with for the city?
Rhodes End is a residential zone, so there were no calls there. There was, okay, let me think. Ocean Lake didn't require parking. Ocean Lake in a mixed-use building doesn't have a parking requirement for the commercial portion, but does for the residential portion. Taft in a mixed-use building doesn't have a parking requirement for any of it. So in making it consistent, yes, in that case, I did make the call and I went with the Ocean Lake requirement of not having parking for the commercial portion, but requiring parking for the residential.
So will that throw some people into non-compliance?
No,
I mean, put another way, are there establishments down there that have residential and commercial that will now be required to provide parking that they didn't before?
No, they would not have to require any parking because this would be a change after the fact of their development. So it would make them legally non-conforming.
Okay.
So they would not have to, whenever a code changes that makes a difference in that requirement, they don't, much like the sign question that Miles had for the Dorchester sign, if it was greater than 100 square feet. If there's a change that comes about in a new code, everyone does not have to go out and come into compliance with that change.
Right. I'm just wondering if it affects anybody down there now.
And I can check, but I don't think
it's just that you don't have to. I'm just, it's
okay.
More curiosity than anything else. Parking is, parking's a sensitive topic when there isn't much of it, so.
It is a sensitive topic, yes.
Okay. Other questions? Anybody? No? Okay. Any testimony received?
Check. Nope.
David, anybody with you? Yes.
And you're still awake.
Yeah. David, I'm sure you're riveted by all of this.
It is probably the highlight of his day. So nice.
Where are you hiding the bag of Cheetos?
All right. Is there a motion to close the public hearing and the record?
So moved.
All right. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. What do you want to do, Commission?
I'll make a motion that we approve ZOA 2020-02 parking and landscaping.
Okay, we're forwarding a recommendation.
Edits that Anne Marie may be making to any section.
Okay, we're forwarding a recommendation to City Council.
Forwarding, okay, great.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Okay, one more. It's now 8:33. The hearing is now open to accept public comment on file ZOA 2019-08 Design Review Standards. A long time coming. This public hearing concerns a city-initiated proposal to amend Title 17 zoning in Chapter 17.20 Multiple Family Residential, the RM zone, and 17.74 Commercial Design Standards. Amendments provide design review guidelines and standards for development in the RM zone. The ordinance also expands existing guidelines and standards for commercial design, including building form and articulation, roof type, exterior materials and color, pedestrian space, exterior lighting, site landscaping, and parking lot landscaping. This ordinance amends the design standards first adopted in 2007. Commissioners, are there any abstentions or disqualifications based on conflict of interest or personal bias? Seeing none. Okay, if you wish to provide testimony, please email it to askinner@lincolncity.org and it will be read into the record. The email should include your name and address, the hearing you are providing testimony for, and whether you are testifying in opposition, in support, or neutral to the hearing in question. Staff, please present your report.
Thank you. Yes, and as Chair Cron has said, this has been a very long time in coming. This project started long before I started and has gone through lots of staff changes. And so I've kind of picked it up at the tail end and hopefully cleaned it up and made it into a presentable ordinance that Planning Commission and that meets the intent of Planning Commission and City Council. Again, there were a couple of joint work sessions. Again, it seemed as though the outcome of those work sessions was to have design standards consistent for the whole city and not necessarily separated by different PEARL designations. So I've done my utmost best to strike through all of the items in the different PEARL designations and get all those items included in the design standard chapter. No changes to any of the land uses that were either allowed or prohibited. Those have all remained the same. The design standards themselves, for the most part, are the same as what is currently in the code. Again, this amendment provides consistency throughout the city. It also provides some pictures and examples. What I did with intent, because the design standards, if something is required, if so, for instance, if it uses the word shall, that means it's required. And in the design standard ordinance world, in this particular ordinance, you can, or the applicant can request an adjustment or a modification to a shall. And to prove their case for the adjustment or modification, they have to show how they're meeting the intent or the guideline, objective, etc., of that particular standard. So what I did is I took the objectives and purposes of Nelscott, Taft, and Ocean Lake and moved those into the design standard chapter so that when an applicant has an adjustment or modification that said applicant would like to make, then they would rely on the intent, objective, and purpose of that particular PEARL for their adjustment or modification. And that is where we would get some distinction between the PEARLs, even though the standards themselves, the standard requirements themselves are the same. Because as we all know, everyone will be everyone always requests adjustments and modifications. So by having the different intents that have been developed by the city over the years, that allows for some variety and some character, maintaining the character of the PEARLs, but still having the consistency that the Planning Commission and City Council wants. So that was my intent in moving all of those items. I am not going to go through this entire thing because that would take us all night. If there, I would just open it up for any questions. If you see something that jumps out, especially Miles and Patty. I'm trying to think who are the commissioners.
Who are the old ones?
For this, yeah, everyone else is new. Mm-hmm. So if you see something that I've missed or that looks awry, let me know. I've done my best to try and capture what everyone wanted, hopefully.
Well, it was a huge effort, and I commend you for stepping into the middle of it when so much had gone on before you got here. So, you know, it was probably difficult to sort of backfill the history and understand where people were going. I have a couple of comments.
Okay.
And one of them is just picking. The definition of clear story is not correct.
Okay. It
is on the top of page 133, and it may be meaning what it is, but it doesn't say it. It says it means a window that extends from the ground floor of a building to near the top of an outside wall. That's not the definition of clerestory. A clerestory is a window that starts above eye level.
Okay.
So that, it could say a high section of wall that contains windows above eye level, or something like that. But because that definition to me sounds more like a wall of window. And the whole point of a clerestory is that you can't look into the window at eye level.
Okay.
So that just needs to be fixed. And the other thing on page 146, line 29. Wait a minute now. I've got two computers on here. 146. It's called out radio and television transmitters or towers, but not cell towers. Is there a reason for that?
Well, that's what it is now. Radio and television transmitters or towers. Cell towers are wireless communications facilities.
Right, and
it's a whole different category, and it's not allowed.
So they're not allowed anywhere.
Wireless communications facilities are allowed in, I believe, the planned industrial zone. And I think they're allowed in the general commercial zone, both as conditional uses.
So I'm trying to understand what the reason would be that we would not want to include it as a conditional use in other areas.
That's up to you guys if you want to. I didn't change any of the conditional uses. This is what's allowed in the chapter in the residential. Mac has a question.
It was more of a comment that if we can, or if it can be included in other areas, that opens up avenues for expansion of infrastructure, and that kind of meets some goals down the line too, or makes it easier to meet goals down the line.
Yeah, I don't know that I necessarily want it to be in like the R15 or the R1RE, but the multi-use residential and commercial, I think that we should at least consider it as a conditional use that would, I mean, we'd still have to go through an approval process, but
right.
It could be important down the line as Max suggested.
Right.
The other one, just a little edit on page 157, line 36, there's an extra the. I want to get points for having read every word of this packet.
You're so good. I'm amazed. Okay, line 36.
Yeah.
Oh, I see that. Yes.
Okay. And then on page 181, when we talk about view protection, I seem to recall that we wanted to add Sillets Bay and the lake into that view protection. It wasn't just the Pacific Ocean. And maybe Miles, am I remembering that incorrectly?
No, you're correct.
Mm-hmm.
You're correct, and I just missed it.
Okay.
Okay.
And I think, let's see, does this include view protection overall? I think that's it. Otherwise, it's an impressive piece of work, Henry. Anybody else have comments?
I had a couple, but since you mentioned the view protection, this is still all on all generally northerly, southerly direction streets, except for Highway 101. And I seem to remember when we did the joint meeting, Lindsay made a suggestion that to her it made the most sense to really have this apply like within a block or two of oceanfront or frontage of any view. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess if we're expanding it to not just the Pacific Ocean, the north and south might not really cover viewscapes.
Might not cover.
Yeah.
Of other areas. So
Yeah,
I would,
I'll have to modify that. Because, yeah, if I add Siletz Bay and Devil's Lake, then
north and south might not be.
yeah. So,
And then I had one other note. It's kind of a small thing, but on page 166, it's talking about the Taft Village core and what is allowed for outdoor sales and sidewalk cafes. And in the specifications, it says that there needs to be a 48-inch, which is a 4-foot clearance. And as far as what we did with signage, and then also on page 149 of these design standards, we require a 5-foot ADA accessible area. And so I was just thinking, would it behoove us right now to just across the board go one or the other? But I think there's no harm in having 5 feet. I like that extra ADA space.
okay.
But that was just one thing, just to make it consistent. And otherwise, those were my only, other than the Pacific Ocean that Patty just mentioned. I think that's all the notes I have.
All right. Other comments? One? No?
Oh, actually, I did have a comment about colors. We talked a lot about colors in the language, and the language is still the same, isn't it? Isn't it kind of neutral?
It is.
Except that bright colors might be okay. And
Yeah, I didn't know what to do with that, Marcy.
we didn't really ever come to any kind of,
Yeah.
we kind of agreed it was vague, but I don't think anyone gave you any good suggestions other than maybe allowing neighborhood organizations or the Pearl area merchant groups or whatever, that wanted to get together and maybe suggest a color palette. But I don't remember us coming to any better suggestions for you on that one.
I recall lengthy conversations during that joint planning commission session
colors.
and with the city council, about colors.
It's a very subjective thing to try to incorporate in a design standard.
Right, and then Lindsay was kind of going on about how bureaucratically, or were you saying that, Anne-Marie, that it's really difficult to even regulate that, put specifics in there.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I got, I think.
Maybe we need a color czar.
Yeah.
All color choices must go through the czar of color.
Let's not just say we did.
Yeah. Any other comments? Corrections, concerns? Miles, did she get everything? You're muted.
Yep, I'm fine.
Okay. All right.
What did the timing on reader signs or electronic signs? It was that it couldn't change more than once an hour, but looking at it, I didn't see, is it still once an hour in there?
I did not change it from what's currently
Still the
there.
same? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Have we had any testimony submitted?
I'm so disappointed. None. This whole night.
You just popped up in your chair.
They just like to come hang out with us in person.
That must be it.
Anybody there?
Timing is everything,
No. I'm sad. I'm sad. Okay. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing and the record?
I'll motion to close the public hearing in the record.
All right. And Marcy seconded it. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay. Pleasure of the commission. You ready to forward this recommendation to city council?
Yes.
Can I have a motion?
I'll move that we forward ZOA 2019-08 design standards to City Council with the minor adjustments that we mentioned in this discussion.
Great. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, go forth. Have fun with City Council. Yay! Okay, any old business?
We do not have any old business.
Do we have any new business?
I have a question on something related to old business. I'm not sure. When Richard did the training for us, I seem to remember something that we were going to have something loaded on our computers or some additional information. I don't remember the exact language, but are ringing any bells?
It was, yes, it's something, and I checked with David, actually and David's, conveniently enough, he is here. David, do you remember that information that was going to be on the laptops?
David, I believe it was the training materials that I provided to the city council. I think that those same materials, I think, were supposed to go to all the planning commissioners.
That's right.
The problem with Dropbox is then you have to explain and train the counselors how to use it. So I don't know.
Yeah, what are you saying? We can't learn
The
it?
planning commissioners would have to be, and I honestly don't like Dropbox. All right, well, you're going to have to give instructions because I can't figure it out.
That would be great.
Why don't you just check with me before you actually do it? Send me you could do that. You could send it to me and then and I could just double check because I know there's one item I had put in the council's materials was the League of Oregon Cities handbook, and we had contacted the league and asked them when were they going to update it, and they kind of freaked out a little bit and then took it off their website. So I'm not sure that I want to give the planning commissioners something that the league kind of freaked out about and removed. So
What?
Good catch.
all right, thanks.
Okay, thank
Thanks,
you.
David.
Any planning commission training?
No training tonight.
Training. Reports or comments? Okay, future agenda items. I think we have the one thing that we deferred, the procedures. Anything else? What's coming up?
Well, we have one other item, provided it doesn't get continued because they haven't submitted the traffic impact analysis yet. But it's a subdivision.
A subdivision.
Yeah, a 40 lot subdivision. It's the Cove Phase 3 over on southeast. I think it's southeast 14th.
Up behind the Shell station?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they did Phase 1 and Phase 2, which is 28 lots, and it's attached houses. There's only 6 houses there now, so I'm not sure why they're proceeding with lots when the original 28 aren't all built out, but they are. So the one thing that I don't have though is the traffic impact analysis, and I'll need that to proceed to the public hearing. So if I don't have that for the second May meeting, then it'll be continued to June.
Okay.
And that's all I have. That's all that's been submitted.
So we may have a shorter meeting.
Yes. Absolutely. Look at Betty. Yes, absolutely.
But we got a lot done in 3 hours. I
think we did. And I appreciate y'all hanging in with this kind of odd format. Lenny, did you have something to say?
No, I did.
Miles?
I was wondering if the 40 unit developer, have you seen him since the pandemic occurred?
I have not.
Okay. That may go away.
All right.
Oh, I do have a comment. I just want to thank you guys for tonight, because it was a long agenda, and I appreciate you going through all of it. It's been so long in coming that I just wanted to get it all done. So you guys are awesome. Thank you.
Totally understood. It's great to get some of those pushed off the table and onward to the next group. So anything else for the good of the order? Okay, here we go.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Have a good night, everybody.
Everyone.